Gareth watched his half-sister from the corner of his eye, his suspicion mounting with every measured breath she took. Irritation flared in his chest. Why was he wasting so much energy observing her every move? He turned away sharply, his jaw set. Who cares what's rotting inside that head of hers? It didn't matter. The day he ascended the throne, this stain upon the Imperial line would be erased from the world forever. All he needed was a little more patience. He downed a cup of fortified wine in a single, savage gulp, as if the liquid could wash away the very memory of her existence. Across the table, Talia raised her own goblet with a practiced, brittle indifference. She felt her fingers begin to tremble, a treacherous, involuntary vibration, and immediately set the vessel back down. Trying to maintain a facade of normalcy, she tucked her hands beneath the table and ran her tongue over her parched lips. The skin where Varkas had touched her felt as though it had been branded. Even through the leather of his gloves, she had felt the distinct, hard relief of his knuckles, as vividly as if his bare skin had been pressed against her own. She forced her shoulders to straighten, rubbing her damp palms against the silk of her skirts. The fabric felt cold and clammy against her skin. A wave of suffocating frustration rose in her chest. The dress she had chosen specifically to provoke Gareth now felt like a shroud. Her bare shoulders and back prickled uncomfortably. Talia clenched her fists. She knew Varkas wasn't looking at her, and yet her nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She was dying to turn around, to see where his gaze was directed, but she held herself rigid. Years of performance had taught her how to maintain a mask of icy detachment, but the cold sweat slicking her skin was a betrayal she couldn't control. As the clinging fabric began to feel like a second, suffocating skin, she bit her lip. What a spectacularly stupid choice this was. Do you not care for the food? The voice was sudden, and Talia flinched. The young monk across from her was watching her with an unsettling intensity. The abbot, I think. She recalled his name with a flicker of contempt and offered a sharp, dismissive shrug. Compared to what is served at the Imperial palace, this is a pathetic imitation at best. The Silas winced, his expression tightening. Wanting to make it clear that his presence was unwelcome, Talia turned away and seized a piece of pie from a nearby platter. If she were eating, perhaps they would stop hovering over her. She forced a dry, tasteless morsel into her mouth and chewed mechanically. It had the texture of a rancid sponge. She tried to swallow the rising nausea with a sip of wine, and that was when she noticed it. Several of the monks were watching her with furtive, greedy eyes. Their gazes felt like oily hands sliding over her skin, more repulsive than any fatty food. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. A disappointing reception. I believe I shall return to my quarters. Gareth shot her a look of pure, unadulterated irritation. Normally, she would have stayed just to spite him, but she felt physically ill, a deep, roiling nausea that wouldn't be ignored. Talia fled the hall. The air in the corridor, free from the heavy scents of roasted meat, wine, and wax, brought a small measure of relief to her stomach. She took a deep, shaky breath, wiped the sweat from her brow, and began to walk. The cold night air bit at her exposed back. She wrapped her arms around herself, the chill raising goosebumps on her skin, and quickened her pace. Sometimes, she didn't even understand why she did it. The endless theater, the scandals, the calculated provocations. What was the point of any of it? The Crown Prince cannot abide your very existence. Sometimes, I think he hates you even more than he hates me. Xenevier's voice echoed in her mind, a soft, velvet-wrapped poison. She remembered a day years ago, the anniversary of the late Empress Bernadette's passing. When Talia had entered the great hall at her mother's side, Gareth had completely lost his mind. He had lunged at the young princess, his hands locking around her throat with a murderous strength. It had taken several courtiers to pry his fingers loose. The aristocrats had been horrified, trying in vain to calm the hysterical boy. It had taken 2 armored guards to restrain the heir to the throne. Once freed from that death grip, Talia had crawled to her mother, trembling and gasping for air. Synoviere had pulled her close, an apparent gesture of protection. For a heartbeat, Talia had felt a sense of safety so profound she had wanted to weep. But then she had looked up. She had seen her mother's face. Synoviere was smiling. It was a look of pure, unadulterated pleasure. From that moment on, Talia had seized every opportunity to torment Gareth. Her reputation had been ground into the dirt, but she didn't care. As long as Gareth's reputation suffered alongside hers, her mother was happy. A hollow, jagged laugh escaped her. Even now, after everything that had happened, she was still a starving child, desperately hunting for a scrap of her mother's affection. Even if I drag the crown prince's honor through the mire, it will never make Synoviere love me. Her mother didn't know how to love. Not the emperor, not even her golden son, Astros. To her, people were merely tools to be used until they broke. Talia understood this perfectly, and yet she continued this suicide mission. If she didn't prove her utility, she would become a non-entity in her mother's eyes. A discarded tool. Your Highness. The voice made her blood run cold. Talia whirled around. A dark, robed figure stood in the shadows of the corridor. She recognized him, one of the monks who hadn't taken his eyes off her during the banquet. Her entire body went rigid with a sudden, sharp tension. Has he been following me? She cast a frantic look around. The long corridor leading to the gardens was utterly deserted. The knowledge that he had been stalking her, waiting for her to reach a secluded place, made her skin crawl. What do you want? Talia injected every ounce of imperial arrogance into her voice, praying he wouldn't hear the tremor of fear beneath it. Her bravado seemed to work. The monk hesitated, his posture shifting. She leveled a withering glare at him, hoping to send him scurrying back to the hall. I asked what you want. It's about what you said. He stammered, his voice thick and uneven. Talia's brow furrowed. What I said? At the reception. The monk fidgeted, his freckled face flushing a deep, mottled red. His gaze dropped, lingering obscenely on her exposed chest and shoulders. Talia forced her legs to stay still. She knew that if she showed even a flicker of weakness, he would strike. She lifted her chin, her expression one of frozen contempt. I have no idea what you are talking about. If you have no business with me, I am leaving. You said you wanted to live up to the expectations of the crown prince. The monk blurted out, the words coming in a frantic, desperate rush. Talia, who had already turned toward the garden, stopped dead. She looked back at him, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. Had he truly taken her taunt seriously? The spiteful jab she'd thrown at Gareth when he'd forbidden her from flirting with the monks? A chill raced down her spine, as sharp and biting as a plunge into ice water.